In my Unit 2 project, I focus on the impact of social media on American teenagers, and my thesis was that social media's impact is negative overall for these teenagers, ultimately affecting one's self-confidence, hindering relationships, and causing emotional distress. So, throughout this project, I really just delved into the research that there is already out there on the impact of social media on teenagers, specifically in America. And I really found extensive research. I felt like all of the research was really well-rounded. I researched each of those three subsections separately, just because I feel like it's important to really get a grasp on each of those things separately and as a whole. So again, those three things are self-confidence, relationships and connections, and overall distress and feelings of anxiety, depression, mental health, that type of stuff. So I found that most of the research argued that social media is negative and has negative consequences on teenagers in general and on their mental health specifically. So I read a lot about how teenagers were their feelings of anxiety and depression increased with social media use. However, I did find an article that was very interesting that argued, is it really social media that's causing anxiety and depression, or is anxiety and depression causing the amount teenagers tend to use social media? I found that to be incredibly fascinating, kind of flipping that typical narrative on its head and examining really just the exact opposite of what standard belief is. So I included stuff like that in my Unit 2 project, just kind of the other side, because as I said before, many of these researchers are arguing the impacts are negative on our teens. Social media use has a negative impact. So I also included my own personal account of social media use as well as a friend of mine. I felt like this project really made me think about my peers and the people in my life that use social media, particularly my fellow teenagers, and I just really wanted to get their perspective on the conversation, because you can research all you want, but hearing that personal account, unedited, unfiltered, is really, really pivotal and crucial to the conversation. But in terms of my pitch and engaging with our class specifically, I would say I was successful in engaging my audience in the pitch homework. I got pretty positive responses and comments to my pitch. I felt like that went really well. I definitely feel like this unit, it built on my first unit, but I feel like this unit, looking into the research and the cold, hard statistics and facts, was very, very interesting to me, just to kind of pull my hypothesis together. Ultimately, my hypothesis that social media has a negative effect on the self-confidence, relationships and connections, and distress of our youth in America, that was proven to be correct. However, I still did take the time to look at different research that kind of contradicted my hypothesis, and I do think it is important to acknowledge that social media can be a positive place for teenagers, especially for the relationships and connections aspect of my thesis. I think that social media can be a place that fosters these types of relationships and connections and allows our teenagers to kind of keep up with what their friends are doing and all that. However, at the same time, viewing these posts, teenagers are not thinking that this isn't an accurate representation of reality. People are consuming this media as it is and thinking, so-and-so has a perfect this, or they vacation here, and look at all this and look at all that. But we really need to help ground our teenagers and kind of just explain that everything we see on social media is not necessarily an accurate portrayal of real life. And we need to remember that life isn't all smiles and, perfect scenery and all that. It's, people have bad days and all, so it's just important to kind of understand and know the teenagers in our life so that we can best support them, because they are our future, and it really, really is important to nurture them and make them feel as though we are here and we want to make them feel safe and supported, especially with mental health. But yeah, overall, I feel like I argue throughout my piece that social media does have a negative impact, but I do think it is important to look at both sides